Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to Boston. I know you're not really here with us, but you're here with us virtually. We're just here in the Boston, New England area. We're very proud to be the very first IACRN local chapter. And hopefully through this virtual visit, you'll be able to see a little bit of what we do here. And we also have some pictures of the kinds of things we would show you if we could have you here in our beautiful city. I don't know how many people know this, but Boston is called the hub. Uh, I'm not 100% sure of the origin of that, but we just assumed it's because it's the hub of the world. So anyway, welcome to Boston and to the New England area. So here's our first slide. My name is Andrea Hale. I'm the current president of the Boston New England chapter. And I am being ably assisted today by Cam Says, who's our secretary and our internet guru, and is going to help us manage this. So just a few things. Everybody's muted right now. If you'd like to speak, you can raise your hand or put something in the chat and Cam will unmute you. If you don't feel comfortable talking or you'd rather not talk, no judgment here. You can just say something in the chat and Cam is monitoring that so she can tell us if there's questions. So please don't hesitate to ask any questions or anything that you would like to know about Boston, the Boston area, our chapter, or the great hospitals that we all work at, or the work that we're doing here. So here's today's agenda. I'm going to speak a little bit. It might not last a half an hour. I didn't actually time myself, but I wanted to give myself a fair amount of time to welcome you to Boston and to New England, to give you some history of medical research in Boston and New England, and then a history of our chapter. Talk about, we're going to see a video of some accomplishments of nurses here at Boston Children's Hospital. It's not research nurse specific, but it is just to go to show you how far back things go here at Children's Hospital, which is one of the oldest freestanding children's hospitals in the world. Our next talk will be from the nurses at Massachusetts General Hospital, or MGH. For those of you who ever read the book, now I'm going to forget the name of it, but there's a famous book written by an intern who was an intern at, if someone can remind me of the name, that would be great. I meant to look it up and I totally forgot. Anyway, there's a book written by a person who was an intern at the Beth Israel Medical Center, which is also here in Boston, in the 1960s. And Mass General Hospital was referred to as man's best hospital because so many great things happened there. The next talk will be from research nursing at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. We do have some recorded interviews with a few of our chapter's founders who will share the history of the chapter and their many years of experience as research nurses. And then we'll have time for a Q&A. We don't anticipate things going much past 2 o'clock, but we're willing to stay here to answer any questions that anybody has. So first, I don't know how many people know about New England, but New England is comprised of 6 states of the United States. We're the northernmost part, the northeasternmost part of the United States. And the 6 states in New England are Connecticut, Maine, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, and Vermont. We make up, the New England states make up 5 of the 13 original colonies or states in the United States. At the time, Maine was originally part of Massachusetts, and then it became the 17th state. And we're very famous for the Boston Tea Party, which was one of the defining moments of the Revolutionary War. So this is what New England looks like. You can see that that Maine is very far to the east, and Connecticut is relatively, and there's 3 states that border on the west. A good part of New England borders on the ocean, and so we're famous for our seafood and all sorts of other things related to the ocean. We also have big mountains, though not as big as Europe or the western part of the state, but there is still a lot of good skiing and winter activities. And you can see those mountain ranges in Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. There are some in Massachusetts, but not quite as high. We're also home, as you can see, to what's the smallest state with the longest name, Rhode Island. Rhode Island was originally called Rhode Island, the state of Rhode Island and Providence Plantations, and they just officially changed their name last year to just the state of Rhode Island. And this is our intricate interstate highway system. Just for FYI for people, if you're driving on a road that is an odd number, it goes north to south. If you're driving on a road that goes east to west, it's an even number. This is the symbol for interstate highways. This means that the name does not change from state to state. This road, Route 90, goes all the way across the United States. This road 95 goes all the way from the northern part of the United States to Florida, and replaced a much smaller road called Route 1, which is still there, but let's just say it probably takes 24 hours to drive this, and it used to take like 24 days to drive down Route 1. This is the state of Massachusetts. This is where most of us work here in the Boston area. The yellow part is sort of the metropolitan Boston area, so kind of some of the bigger suburbs that surround Boston. Those of you who are in the UK will probably notice that some of these names are very similar to yours. So many people from Europe have settled here in Massachusetts. We do have a few islands. The two biggest ones are Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard. Really great fun in the summer. So if you ever come here and actually have a visit, two great places to visit. We also do have a state medical college that's located in Worcester, UMass Medical Center, that has a medical facility associated with that. There's hospitals all over and research nurses all over both of these areas. So here's some fun facts about Boston and the New England area. The first public Boston Latin, still here today. The first college in the United States was founded here in Boston, Harvard, in 1635. The oldest school of music in the United States, New England Conservatory of Music, was founded here in 1867. The first college for women, Mount Holyoke, was founded in 1837. 4 of the 8 Ivy League colleges are in New England. And the first public library in the country opened in Peterborough, New Hampshire in 1833. So we have a very strong foundation in education, especially education for all people. We love our sports here in Boston. We consider ourselves the greatest sports fans in the world. Our sports teams have won 40 championships, and New York does have more than us. However, we have only 1 team in each sport, and they have 2. So we're actually beating them. Fenway Park, which was built in 1912, is the oldest baseball park in the United States that is still operating. Revere Beach in Revere, Mass. is the country's first public beach. And the first US marathon was the Boston Marathon, run on April 19th, 1897. It was run consecutively, including the year that there was a terrible bombing, until last year. Last year was the only year there was no marathon. It's currently rescheduled, I believe, for September. So we're going to keep trying to continue that tradition. And just in a moment of maternal pride, my daughter ran the Boston Marathon in 2019. And my father has ran several marathons during his life. The Boston area is really well known for the exceptional medicine, medical practice, and research that's done here. 2 of the top-ranked hospitals in the US are located here. Children's Hospital has been consistently ranked the #1 children's hospital in the United States. Boston alone has more than 20 hospitals, and there are over 200 hospitals in the entire New England area. There are 11 medical schools throughout New England, at least one in every state. And there are more than 60 nursing schools, including top-ranked Yale and Boston College. Yale is in Connecticut. So there were a lot of medical discoveries here, and I will explain why I chose each of these. Some of them aren't overtly medical, but the first US windmill, which is probably one of the answers to our global climate change problem, was located here in the Boston area. The first public smoking ban, so one of the first public health measures, was here, was imposed here in 1632. It was immediately revoked. However, we did sort of lead the way in reinventing the smoking ban in the 1990s. The first inoculation in America was in 1723 here. The first school for the blind, which is still in operation, was opened in 1829. And one of the most famous things that happened here was the first use of ether for surgery at the Mass General Hospital. And they actually have a little museum devoted to this called the Ether Dome. 1919, the Floating Hospital for Children, which is now Tufts Medical Center, participated in the development of infant formula, which is Similac. 1938, the first surgery to inject a congenital heart defect took place here at Boston Children's Hospital. And based on the fact that Boston Children's Hospital has a very hard time transitioning their adult patients to outside adult medical facilities, that person is probably still being seen here at Children's Hospital if he's still alive. The first culture of the polio vaccine, the polio virus, which led to the development of the vaccine, was done here at Boston Children's Hospital. In 1948, Sidney Farber, and we'll hear more about the institution named after him later, pioneered chemotherapy in children. The first kidney transplant took place at the Peter Brigham Hospital, which is now Brigham and Women's Hospital. The first limb attachment took place at the Mass General Hospital in 1962. The first cancer gene to detect cancer, retinoblastoma, was discovered at the Mass Eye and Ear Infirmary. In 2006, the first successful cardiac implant took place at Children's. In 2008, the first full face transplant took place at Brigham and Women's. In 2011, the first bionic lower leg system was developed in a lab here. And in 2013, the first chapter of IACRN was formally established in the Boston area. So a little bit of history about the Boston chapter. So very informally, even before IACRN was officially, IACRN itself was kind of in its infancy, an informal roundtable was held to discuss the birth of IACRN and the Boston chapter. In 2009, the first IACRN meeting was held here in Boston. And on April 21st, in 2011, an idea was formed. The idea to have a local chapter was founded here at a place called the Harvard Gardens, where founding members, mostly from the Mass General, met for a planning meeting. The Harvard Gardens is famous to those of us in the Boston area because a lot of things were founded there. And it is a place where most people from the Mass General go to have their planning meetings for lots of different things. So it's actually just a pub, but it's kind of famous in this area. So here's a little timeline. I hope everybody can see it. I know the printing is a little small. And it's these are the early days, starting in again with the first conference. In November, the Boston IACRN was recognized as the first pilot chapter. On June 14, 2012, the pilot chapter celebrated its first anniversary at the Countway Library with a birthday cake, which is the Harvard Library. Oops, sorry, I was supposed to go down and I went up. On June 16th, there was an introductory meeting for CRNs in the Boston area. Then we were established as the first chapter. Then we celebrated our first anniversary. And on March 7th, 2013, we were granted full chapter status during a meeting held during a snowstorm. The president and president-elect of the parent chapter attended the meeting to share the news. And at that moment, we became the first official chapter of IACRN. In 2019, we're continuing our upgrades. In 2020, we converted to all online meetings. We've been holding our meetings online since June of 2020. And we've been offering programs for members 3 times a year, blizzard, rain, shine, or pandemic. So this is our 10th anniversary. Our chapter is growing. We have more than 25 members now, and we are well on our way to continuing our innovations. Our June meeting will be the first sponsored webinar with a contact hour credit offered by IACRN. So here's just a little bit easier way to look at what's happening to us now. And I will say, now that we've gone fully remote, I think we're all looking forward to being able to get together. And I did just hear that most of our restrictions are being lifted here on May 29th, I think, which will usher in a new phase. But we'll continue to offer meetings remotely because, as you can see from our map, we have a wide catchment area and it is hard for people to get together. So that is basically the history of Boston and the IACRN. So I thought we'd show you a few things that you might see if you came here. And actually, I sort of usually have an introductory thing to Plymouth Rock, because the first thing everybody wants to know is, how big is Plymouth Rock? So Plymouth Rock is the place where the Pilgrims landed and established the first colony of settlers here in Massachusetts. It's considered one of the one of the birthplaces of the United States. There were several other colonies established, but some of them didn't survive. And this is really recognized as the first settlement of the people who went on to create the United States. This is where our first Thanksgiving was spent, celebrated with the local Native American tribes and the Pilgrims. And the first thing everybody wants to know is how big Plymouth Rock is. Everyone imagines an enormous thing, and I hate to disappoint you, but the bottom right-hand corner is Plymouth Rock. It's inside the portico that's in the upper left-hand corner. It is located close to a beautiful beach with beautiful sunsets, and that's what the rest of the pictures are. So Faneuil Hall was basically sort of the industrial part of the United States during the Revolutionary War, and it's now a kind of an outdoor market with a lot of restaurants, places to eat, and things to buy. Big tourist attraction, always bring people here, very easy to get to on the subway. And now moving outside of Boston, because we want to recognize the rest of New England. This is Yale University, which is located in Hartford, Connecticut. I'm sorry, New Haven, Connecticut. Yale is one of the Ivy League colleges. This is a lighthouse in Maine. So Maine's really well known for its lighthouses and its beautiful shoreline and its freezing cold water, which never warms up. This is the Man in the Mountain, located in the New Hampshire White Mountain Range. You can see the face of the man. It's actually been restored a little bit because it started corroding, and everybody just likes looking at the Man in the Mountain. Oops. This is the Breakers. This is a huge mansion in Newport. Newport is part of an island off the coast of Rhode Island that's known for its giant mansions and the place where many wealthy people have summered throughout history, including John Kennedy, who was the president in the 1960s. This is the Vermont State House, and a lot of state houses look like the Capitol. Our United States Capitol. This is one of them. The Vermont. Everyone knows about Burlington, Vermont, but not many people know that the capital of Vermont is actually Montpelier, which is where this is located. And now to some hospitals that are participating today, and also a couple of things to note about these hospitals. The four hospitals in this picture I'm going to show you were part of the original General Clinical Research Center NIH program here in the United States. And when that sort of morphed into our current system, which is clinical and translational study units, and then it's morphed into something else, I'm not totally sure. These hospitals all had a clinical research center in them and participated in the NIH program. And nurses from all these hospitals participated in the founding of IACRN. And in addition to that, all of them participate in the only, or at least it was the first group application to the Clinical and Translational Study Unit program, which is called the Harvard Catalyst, since we're all Harvard teaching hospitals. So this is the Mass General back in the old days and in its current incarnation. Boston Children's Hospital, in the old days, that building is actually still standing, but all the land behind it, to the left of it, to the right of it, and across the street from it is all Children's Hospital now. This is a picture of the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, just from one angle. It actually is quite expansive and goes a little bit in the direction, I believe, behind it, if I'm thinking of the right angle. And the picture of the Peter Brent Brigham, which is part now of Brigham and Women's Hospital, which is a huge, expansive hospital that absorbed a couple of different hospitals. The Peter Brent Brigham was the first part of it. And that's it. I just want to thank Sheila Driscoll, Kathy Griffith, Mary Larkin, Amy Sproula for their help with the timeline of IACRN, and for all of you for taking a little tour with us through the Boston area and New England. So does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask now? Okay. If not, I'm just going to check the chat for a second. Hi, everyone. Hi, Eva. I hope you enjoyed your tour of Boston. Okay, so I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen because I was having trouble with my link. The next thing that we're going to show is a video of some of the accomplishments of nurses at Boston Children's Hospital. And then we're going to move on to the day in the life of a presentation from our nurses at the Mass General.
Everyone's saying that again. We'll give it a try.
I don't hear it, Cam.
Sorry, did you say you can't hear the sound of the video at all? Oh, shoot. Okay.
Thank you, Cam. So I was just reading the chat and noticing that several people actually have a connection to Boston. So that's awesome. And also, I know it's about halfway through, but the HIV grant that had a nurse as one of the person to receive the grant. I worked, that was my very first job at Children's, and that was the program that I worked for. And that was also my very first job in research, and that was HIV research was sort of what got me started in this amazing journey that I personally have been on also. So I don't see anything in the chat. So I think we're going to turn things over to the nurses from the Mass General, Mallory and Katrina.
Sorry, I'll get you, Katrina. Sorry. I have everybody muted to prevent disruption.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay? All good? All right. Thanks so much for having us. Mallory and I will just be talking briefly about what we've been up to at Mass General in terms of clinical research nursing, and specifically our commitment to building a community of practice. So my name is Katrina Grant, and I'm currently the clinical research manager at the Tierney Lab, which is a PI-run lab that invents and fabricates all sorts of different imaging devices that use light to diagnose disease. And then Mallory, I'll let you introduce yourself if she can. She's on.
Hi, everybody.
Perfect.
My name is Mallory Hillard, and I'm a clinical research nurse practitioner at Massachusetts General Hospital. I work at the Diabetes Research Center with Mary Larkin, and my work focuses primarily on type 1 diabetes research on the bionic pancreas. That's been a large part of my career. And I also have been lucky enough to work with Catherine Griffith, Mary, and Katrina in building a collaborative for CRNs at Mass General, which we're going to share with you today.
Perfect. So we figured we'd start. I know Andrea touched a little bit on this, but just to add a little bit more details on sort of where CRM practice began, where research all began at Mass General. And so as Andrea talked about, there was what was called Ward 4, which existed in the Bullfinch building, which was that image that Andrea showed of Mass General back in the day. And so that was the second center in the United States that was specifically designed for and dedicated to clinical research. And it was so successful that the NIH ended up using that as a model to create similar centers across the whole country. And so really between 1925 to 1940s and 50s, this center grew more and more and had nurses helping to conduct some of the studies there. And so, of course, lots occurred from the 1950s to 2021, but really what is of interest today is talking about what is happening with research nurses today at Mass General. So what basically evolved, the Ward 4 evolved into the Clinical Research Translational Center. And so a lot of MGH's research nurses work there today, but not all of them. So for example, neither Mallory or I work on that center, but that is one place that many research nurses do. And so that brings us to what we've been up to today, which Mallory is going to talk about.
So CRN practice today at MGH has many different capacities and roles. So there's a roughly 200 clinical research nurses that are working at MGH. And we often practice in various different capacities, roles, and settings. And we have a mix often of educational, clinical, and administrative responsibilities. So our job titles and our sort of roles often vary. So this is just a list of the different CRN job titles that you'd see at Mass General today. So we have clinical research nurse, clinical research nurse coordinator, research study nurse, project manager, research nurse scientist, and we have principal investigator, co-investigator, and then also job roles can also be clinical research nurse, a coordinator, a research scientist, and a clinical research nurse practitioner. And these various different roles and job titles expand out into the different settings across Mass General. So we have CRNs working on the inpatient units, outpatient clinics, community health centers, and across the hospital on the main campus, as well as on the satellite locations. And next slide. And so because there's a variation in the job titles, there's different job codes, and there's often different roles, responsibilities, and related to the practice setting as well as the research team that you're working on. And that can sort of lead to CRNs being compartmentalized from the rest of their fellow CRNs, as well as the larger nursing community within the organization. So for instance, certain teams may only have one CRN working on various different studies, as where these are larger centers, like the centers that Katrina and I work for. We have many different CRNs working together in one office, so we have more of a connection with our fellow CRNs, but this varies across settings. So that can really make it challenging to unify clinical research nurses and establish like a practice environment where we can promote clinical research nurse educational opportunities that are specific to our specialty practice. And it also makes it hard to sort of promote professional development and camaraderie. And there's no centralized CRN orientation, which is something we are working on. And because of this disconnect, there's really there wasn't a mechanism for CRNs to connect with each other. And there's often like a lack of understanding across the institution about the role and the value of the clinical research nurse and what they bring to their practice environment on the research team. And so, and over the past few years, well, specifically in 2019, but way before this, I know Catherine and Mary were working on, building this type of community, and they knew that there was a need for this. And it was very evident that we needed connection and unity among CRNs at Mass General. So in 2019, we formed a steering committee, which then eventually evolved into the MGH Clinical Research Nurse Collaborative. The co-chairs of the committee are myself and Katrina, and then our advisors are Mary Larkin and Catherine Griffith. And we've really built, we started very small, and then we sort of worked to identify other CRNs within the MGH community and get the word out there that we were working on a steering committee and working to sort of create this community of CRNs. And so the purpose of the collaborative is really to connect and empower clinical research nurses within MGH and, integrate them into the greater MGH community, as well as, foster a connection amongst other CRNs. And so the experienced clinical research nurses that are part of the collaborative, we've worked to partner with various senior leadership in the Department of Nursing, in the Munn Center for Nursing Research at Mass General. And we really want to sort of, establish this partnership between research and clinical care through mentorship, collaboration, and helping clinical research nurses, nurse practitioners, staff nurses, and anyone who's interested in research sort of be able to develop their career appropriately, have resources to go to when they're starting out or if they need support, and really have mentors and people to link up with who understand their practice, who understand sort of the nuances of research, and really have a community of people who are behind them. And so this is just a little graphic of sort of how our collaborative comes together. So you have MGH, and then you have nursing and research. And on the nursing side, there's the Munn Center for Nursing Research. And then on the research side, we have the Division of Clinical Research, and we're kind of bridging those together and through the collaborative. And through the collaborative, we're bringing together, research clinicians, so CRNs, nurse practitioners, and forming this collaborative group who is working on many different initiatives based on what we've identified sort of amongst our core membership of what we've heard from some of the nurses that we've been working with about the common challenges. And so we have a couple different little working groups right now. And so we have one subcommittee that's working on a CRN orientation. We also have another committee that sort of works on CRN education and publicity and working with the Department of Clinical Research to help, get more CEUs and educational opportunities available for CRNs. And then we also have the annual CRN meeting with IACRN. So we're trying to loop the CRNs that are in our organization, link them up with IACRN and make sure they know that this organization exists specifically for our specialty. And then overall, in general, it sort of funnels down into creating this community of practice that we hope to continue to foster at Mass General. So our progress to date, we have really made a lot of leaps and bounds, especially over the last year. We've obviously established our mission and set some goals, and we've maintained a core membership, which is growing, which is really exciting. And we now have regular monthly meetings where we get together and talk about the projects that we're working on and different opportunities available for CRNs and sort of share our experiences, which has been particularly helpful throughout the pandemic. We've identified over 170 CRNs at Mass General and collated a distribution list so that we can reach out to these CRNs and keep them updated on the things that are going on in our community and the events that are coming up. And then we've also partnered, as I mentioned, with senior leadership from various departments, including the MUN Center and the Department of Clinical Research, to continue promoting CRN practice at MGH. We've held 3 annual programs, as well as a COVID fireside chat, where we've had really a pretty significant attendance at every program with over 50 people attending, which is big for us. And we've also developed a proposal for a standardized CRN orientation, which we are continuing to work on. We've published a couple articles in the Caring Headlines magazine, and we've actually earned our own space on the Yvonne Munn Nursing Research website. And we've also created a Teams channel for the MGH Nursing Collaborative, which links all of the people on the distribution list together who are working together. And so our keys to our progress to date is really, oh, actually, Katrina, is this the slide you're doing? Or is this mine? Sorry.
Thank you. I couldn't unmute myself.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically we wanted to highlight that, we're obviously super proud of the progress we've made, but certainly could not have done it without a few really key things that we feel like have been vital to our progress to date. And it sort of goes without saying that aside from what's happening at the institution level, IACRN's role and just being a place that's dedicated to research nurses and advancing their professionalism, et cetera, has been overall super helpful. But at the institutional level at MGH, we've really sort of focusing on the role of the community and understanding who the different stakeholders are, how they all come together. And even the schematic that Mallory showed has helped us to sort of visualize where we fit in the whole picture and understand who we need to loop in at different points to be able to make any sort of progress. So aside from that, we've also been really lucky with having support from both the hospital and nursing leadership level. So in particular, the director of the MUN Center, whose name is Gordia Bannister, has really been a champion for us and been a resource to help us navigate how to get things done and the right way to do it and who to loop in when. Of course, Mary and Catherine have been absolutely fantastic in both bringing their past knowledge and experience and helping us to bring people together and think through how we make change happen at the hospital level for research nurses. And then it's been great actually with sort of an unlikely benefit of the COVID pandemic is that we became more savvy with remote and Zoom meetings, which has actually really helped us with keeping our meeting sizes on a higher level. So I think it's a lot easier for a lot of people to jump on a Zoom at the end of the day versus try and navigate through Boston and go somewhere physically for a meeting. So that's something we're definitely feel like has been a key to our recent progress. And then overall, just like with many other things, we've been patient and we've been determined to make change happen and meet research nurses where they're at and hear from them and try and cater to the needs of nurses at the institution. So then in terms of what we see as our next steps and high level vision for the future, we're committed to continuing to advocate for CRNs and CRN practice across MGH. So through our partnerships with the Munn Center and with the Division of Clinical Research. One of our big goals is just to continue to identify CRNs because of all the things that Mallory mentioned, where we have different roles and job titles. That's a big project in and of itself, but we're making a lot of progress on it. And then more recently, we're also realizing that the managers of CRNs is another big group that we need to identify and engage since they're responsible for many of the decision making as well. And then excitingly, we get to promote and support CRN certification through IACRN, which has been great. And that's requiring some education of both the nursing and research communities on its importance and how it's different from the other certifications that exist. Next, in relation to that, is planning programs that offer CEs so that nurses are able to get their CRN certification. And that will partially involve something called the Research Nurse Roundtable, which existed a few years ago that we want to revitalize, and basically would be sort of a fireside chat, informal sort of forum where nurses would speak about practice issues or best practices, et cetera. And then, as Mallory mentioned, the CRN orientation is a huge goal of ours, and I think will sort of have a ripple effect to many other good things for CRNs at MGH. And then again, overall, just we're committed to building this community of practice, however long it will take and whatever struggles we encounter, but we have an awesome team who's really committed to making this happen. So we're definitely lucky that way. So with that, that wraps up our sort of quick update on what we're up to at Mass General. Mallory and my emails are there, the link to where our CRN info is there. And then just really want to thank Mary Catherine, Gordia Bannister, Stacy Ann Goodridge, Tatiana, and Amy for all of their support. And we're happy to take questions. So in the chat, people are asking who manages the research nurses? Great question. So it varies. So if they work on the TCRC, the Translation and Clinical Research unit, then there's a nurse manager there. In my case, my manager is a physician who's the PI of the lab. And so it really varies. And that's part of the challenge, is that there's different managers of research nurses. There's really not one central manager, so to speak. Recently, within the last couple of years, Mass General has implemented that if your direct manager is not a nurse, that you need to have a co-signer who is a nurse for your annual evaluation. So that's sort of taken steps to streamline things a little bit, but certainly not a perfect process. And I don't know if Mary or Mallory have other tidbits on that.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a chat. Mary could probably speak more to the managerial side of that, but I think that's also one of the biggest challenges, particularly when we're thinking about creating a CRN orientation, because when you start as a CRN, depending on what department you're starting in or what team you're starting on, your orientation will be very different than Katrina's orientation or my orientation. So we really wanted to make sure that we had something that created some structure so that you could get a core sort of orientation and then go into your study specific learning, per protocol, and sort of giving CRNs some foundation to start on. But I think this is a challenge that many of us, it's not unique to MGH, and I think Mary could probably speak more to this, but it's definitely something that we see as a challenge, is the sort of the fact that multiple people are managing CRNs.
Then Maxton brought up that they're experiencing the same challenges. So it is nice. We're not all alone.
Yeah.
we're fighting the fight together.
And I don't know if Mary's muted, so if she had something to share, I don't think she would be able to. Is she unmuted?
I'm going to try to unmute everybody.
While we're waiting for that, Tammy had a question. What types of topics do you discuss at your monthly meetings?
So yeah, it definitely varies depending on what's been happening, but we're really like the orientation and how we move that forward has been a big one. Planning of different events. So, you know, our annual events and our fireside chat, we've used that time during the meeting to sort of narrow down what we want to talk about, what we want to accomplish. And then we also, so Gordia Bannister, who's the director of the Munn Center, is one of our big advisors. So if we're planning to update her, then we'll use our meeting time to sort of highlight what we need her input on, or what we want to accomplish next. And generally too, it's a nice sort of open forum for nurses to say something that maybe has been going on for them or they need advice on. So it can vary a bit, but generally it follows that sort of pattern.
Yeah, we've also been discussing a lot of the CRN certification, because now that it's out, you know, helping people figure out how to go about that and figuring out how to, again, as Katrina mentioned, providing opportunities for people to get CEUs and to build their portfolio and such.
Hi, this is Mary Larkin. I work with Katrina and Mallory. So awesome job, you guys. I'm so proud of all the work that we've done on this group. And I think that the answer about who do research nurses report to is one of the things we're trying to get to the bottom of through developing this community. So it's been a process of dialogue, of bringing us all together and finding out just who do you report to. You know, it hasn't been known actually, because people work, some of them work in silos. And then as Katrina mentioned, we've also realized that we want to develop a work group of people who are managing research nurses, who are not all nurses. So I think we're in that dialogue phase, and we've had so much support from our nurse leaders and also our research leaders that we're also trying to, I guess, connect those two worlds, because as research nurses in our institution, we kind of stand with one foot in nursing and one foot in the clinical research arena. So I think through our work, we're going to be able to connect those two worlds in a way that hasn't been done before. So so stay tuned. We'll tell you how it all evolves. It's a big organization here, and so it's a lot of dialogue. But thanks for giving us the opportunity to present.
Thanks. Thank you for presenting. There's actually another question. Does Mass General have an institutional membership with IACRN, or are the research nurses individual members? I actually think I can answer that. I can answer that for the local chapter. There's no institutional membership with the local chapter. I don't know about the international chapter, the international group.
Yeah, not right now, all individual.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And actually, I was just thinking as Mary was talking about the challenges of who manages research nurses. Here at Children's, if you are hired as a nurse and perform nursing functions, you have to report to a nurse. So it does make things very complicated when you are the only nurse in the department. And so, for example, I work in the Division of Endocrinology, where I'm the only research nurse, although there are several nurses who work in the clinic. And I report to the Director of Ambulatory Nursing, who is a very nice person and very supportive, but literally has no idea what I do all day. So even though you're reporting to a nurse, sometimes that can be, you know, it could be an issue too. And if you are hired outside of nursing, then you cannot perform any nursing role. So that can be a problem too. So just, it is really interesting to see that everybody's facing the same things all over the world. Does anybody have any more questions for Mallory and Katrina?
Looks like Cecilia asked, are you required to complete hospital nurse competencies? So that we, at least when I started, you go through the general hospital orientation, but I don't think, yeah, I think because I was in research, I don't recall that I went to Do you recall, Mallory or Mary? What the, I don't think there was anything specific. Because I wasn't in clinical nursing, I just went to my area.
Yeah, I mean, like we complete, you know, in our office, we complete like, we're an outpatient, so we complete like IV insertion training. Like we do all of those certifications and such. But yeah, I think it might be different across, depending on, I think, what you're hired into.
Mhm.
I don't know if Mary has any insight into that. Or maybe she's not on the call anymore.
Yeah, but basically at the institution level, it's really a
Yeah.
general orientation. And then what we're
Yeah.
trying to resolve is having a CRN specific one that would be applied to all versus just kind of each individual
'cause,
place figuring
You
it
know,
out.
I think as we all know, like, you know, there's like Celia brought up the sort of hospital competencies, but then I think the other side of that coin is when you go into these research teams and you're the nurse, you know, there's a delegation of responsibilities and you might have different roles on the team, and, you know, making sure everyone's operating within their scope of practice, and depending on what your research protocols call for in terms of like the procedures you're doing. So, you know, there's a lot of sort of training that needs to be done in that. And I wonder, we were, you know, thinking about if someone's hired on a new team and there's just a PI and a nurse, like, you know, how would that person know where to start in terms of what needs to be done and what they need to have in terms of regulatory certification and things like that. So there's sort of those two sides of those coins. And that's one of the things we're hoping with the CRN certification, that will sort of help integrate, you know, CRNs into their team setting, especially if they don't get an actual orientation or into, you know, it's usually a quick sort of onboarding type of thing on many study teams, I think. So but I think that's something that's pretty consistent. I mean, it's a consistent challenge that I hear in other organizations as well. So
And there's one more question. Do you all have the same employer?
yes, we're all hired, we're all Mass General employees.
Okay, are there any more questions for the Mass General crew? If not, next up is Dana Farber. So I think that's you, Cam.
Sure, yeah. So we're gonna start with some videos as well, and then we have Kristen on to answer any questions at the end. Just gonna share my screen.
If everyone could mute themselves if they're not speaking.
Thanks,
And
everyone.
is there anyone else that needs unmuting, Cam?
No, not for now. Mallory, I'm gonna mute you. I think you're good. Just checking. Yeah.
Hello, and welcome to Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, a world leader in cancer research and treatment. As a Harvard Medical School teaching hospital, our faculty includes the world's best and brightest physicians and researchers. Our unique approach features equal parts clinical and research work, where breakthrough medicines and treatments are brought from bench to bedside and bedside back to bench. And we partner with two of the world's top-ranked hospitals, Brigham and Women's and Boston Children's, and that provides complete and integrated care for our adult and our pediatric patients. Dana-Farber researchers have contributed to the development of 35 of 75 cancer drugs recently approved by the FDA for use in cancer patients, and we are consistently ranked by U.S. News & World Report as the #1 cancer hospital in New England. Today, the Institute employs more than 5,000 staff, faculty, and clinicians that support more than 640,000 annual outpatient visits, more than 1,000 hospital discharges per year, and has over 1,100 open clinical trials.
Today we are going to take you on a virtual tour of some of the most interesting and frequently visited sites on the Longwood campus. Let's start outside the Smith Research Building at this statue of our founder, Dr. Sidney Farber, with the famous Jimmy. In 1948, just 1 year after Dr. Farber founded the Children's Cancer Research Foundation, a young patient of his named Einar Gustafsson was selected to speak on a national radio program, Truth or Consequences, which was broadcast from his room at Boston Children's Hospital. Dubbed Jimmy by Dr. Farber to protect his privacy, Einar wished for a television set to watch his favorite baseball team, the Boston Braves, while in treatment. During the radio broadcast, Braves players crowded into Jimmy's hospital room with gifts, including the authentic team uniform you see him wearing here. The show ended with a plea for listeners to send contributions so Jimmy could get his TV set. Within minutes of the broadcast ending, people who listened on their car radios arrived at the hospital with money for Jimmy. In the days to come, thousands of envelopes stuffed with coins and dollar bills came by mail. Not only did Jimmy get his television, but more than $200,000 was raised for research and treatment at Dr. Farber's center, and the Jimmy Fund was born. Now, let's go into the Dana Building.
The Dana Building originally housed several floors of clinics dedicated primarily to adult outpatient care and operations until the Yawkey Center for Cancer Care was dedicated in 2011. Today, with the exception of the Jimmy Fund Clinic on the 3rd floor, Dana is devoted to administrative and research endeavors. For decades, Dana-Farber investigators have turned to zebrafish as a powerful research model. The genes of this tiny tropical fish are remarkably like those of humans, allowing them to play a key role in the discovery of life-saving therapies. Dana-Farber's dynamic zebrafish display features 477 personal inscriptions honoring patients, caregivers, and loved ones. These notes of hope and appreciation are from generous donors whose gifts are helping to advance innovative research and compassionate care at Dana-Farber. Let's take the patient elevators to the 3rd floor.
Visitors to the 3rd floor of the Dana Building are greeted by this statue of Wally the Green Monster. Wally is the official mascot for the Boston Red Sox. His name comes from the Green Monster, the famous left field wall at Fenway Park. Wally sits just outside the Jimmy Fund Clinic in tribute to the Red Sox's long commitment to our pediatric patients. The Jimmy Fund Clinic is one of the world's premier cancer centers for pediatric cancer treatment and research. It encourages hope for children with cancer and their families. Designed especially for the comfort and convenience of pediatric cancer patients and their families, the Jimmy Fund Clinic follows the family-centered care philosophy of Institute founder Dr. Sidney Farber, assuring that a patient's psychological, family, and spiritual needs are met as they receive life-saving medical care.
You can get almost anywhere in the Institute from the 3rd floor. From the Jimmy Fund Clinic, cross the Panmass Challenge Bridge to the Knuckle. The Knuckle is where the Dana, Smith, and Yawkey buildings converge. To the left, through the Smith Building, are the bridges to our partners in patient care, Boston Children's Hospital, and Brigham and Women's Hospital, including the Dana-Farber Inpatient Hospital, located on 6B, 6C, and 6D within the BWH Tower. You can also access the Jimmy Fund Building with the Kraft Blood Donor Center and the Boston Red Sox Jimmy Fund Auditorium. On the way behind the elevator bank is the Office of Postdoc and Graduate Studies. To the right is the Yawkey Center for Cancer Care, the Institute's home for adult patient care and clinical research. This state-of-the-art facility was designed with extensive input from patients and their families and contains 7 clinical floors divided by specialty, clinical administrative offices, and more. Past the medical records desk, you will find the Yawkey Conference Center, including the Cutler Art Gallery and the Levine Family Dining Pavilion. Along the way, take time to appreciate some of the hidden treasures in the Dana-Farber art collection, and take a few minutes to stop in the Stoneman Healing Garden, where you will find bamboo trees, lush greenery, and bright flowers lining the glass walls. The peaceful garden is a source of tranquility and relaxation for patients and families.
On the 2nd floor of the Yawkey Center, you will find patient services such as central registration, the pharmacy, lab services, and the chapel. Hidden in the stairwell in Yawkey 1 is a display to commemorate a construction milestone, the signing of the steel beams that support the Yawkey building. During the Yawkey Center's construction, young Jimmy Fund Clinic patients would post their names in the windows, hoping that an ironworker would immortalize them on a beam. The inscriptions represent the names of patients in treatment, staff members who cared for them, cancer survivors, DFCI benefactors, and all those who live on in the memories of loved ones. Today, these names remain visible to all who enter the center, a reminder to the researchers, clinicians, and the support staff of our shared mission.
On the first floor, off the beautiful Yawkey lobby, services include volunteer services, the Blum Resource Center, which provides patients and families with up-to-date and reliable cancer information, and Friends Place, which is a unique shop designed to help patients undergoing treatment to find items such as hats, wigs, and mastectomy recovery items. The Friends Corner gift shop is open to both patients and staff and also has a robust online shop. While you are here, look up at the Human Nature Mandala, which includes more than 250 images relating to flora and fauna native to New England.
As you make your way from the Dana lobby towards the Shields Warren building, you can't miss the Boston Red Sox Jimmy Fund Gallery, a long corridor decorated with baseball paraphernalia. That's the way to the Mayer building, which hosts a number of the Institute's laboratories. That's also the way to the Office of Human Resources and Occupational Health Services. Just past the baseball exhibit is the Zakim Center for Integrative Therapies and Healthy Living, where our caregivers integrate the practice of complementary therapies like acupuncture, Reiki, music therapy, meditation, and others into traditional cancer care.
In the immediate neighborhood, our research continues across the street at the Longwood Center, a state-of-the-art research facility at the corner of Longwood and Brookline Avenues, which opened in 2015. In the wet and dry labs and offices in the Center for Life Sciences building at 3 Blackfan Circle, and across the street in the Harvard Institutes of Medicine building. Biomedical research is also being conducted in collaboration with Harvard Medical School in the Sealy Mudd building on the HMS Quad. 375 Longwood is just across the street, and 10 Brookline Place and 20 Overland Street are a short walk or shuttle ride away. You can catch the shuttle at the Dana lobby entrance or in front of the Mayer building outside of Human Resources. The newest extension of our Longwood campus, Dana-Farber Cancer Institute Chestnut Hill, is located in Newton, less than 5 miles from here. The brand new 140,000 square foot facility features a range of clinical adult outpatient services as well as imaging, pharmacy, nutrition, and genetic services. The site also includes a coffee bar, a gift shop, and meals available all day at the Pan Mass Dining Pavilion. Dana-Farber also partners with providers in local communities in Massachusetts and New Hampshire to provide enhanced cancer care to patients in their own communities. This network allows the Institute to bring knowledge, research, and care to a greater number of patients and combine the strengths of several institutions. If you are joining us today from one of our adult outpatient centers, collaborative or network locations, welcome.
We want you to know how happy we are to have you here at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. No matter your role, you're a critical part of our mission. We thank you for choosing to join us and adding to the diverse perspectives, cultures, and identities that drive our breakthrough science and world-class clinical care. We can't wait to witness the impact you'll have on the lives of your colleagues and our patients. Again, welcome to Dana-Farber.
Good afternoon. I'm going to talk to you today about research nursing leadership infrastructure at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. My name is Kristen Legor, and I am the Associate Chief Nursing Officer at Dana-Farber, and I oversee research. Additional nursing leadership for research includes Karen Caparata. She oversees our solid tumor research nurses, as well as our research nurse residency program. She oversees research nursing at main campus and at our Chestnut Hill location. Next, we have Alyssa Gentile. She oversees the research nurses in our satellite locations and our network. And third, we have Maura Dacey. Maura oversees all of our hematological research nurses, as well as some solid tumor research nurses, including neuro-oncology, cutaneous melanoma, and head and neck. Maura also oversees, in partnership with Karen, the research nursing practice at Maine campus, and she also oversees and acts as a liaison to our research nursing activities that happen at the Dana-Farber Inpatient Hospital, as well as in partnership with Brigham and Women's Hospital.
Hi everyone, I'm Leah Killian and I'm one of the program co-leads for the Research Nurse Residency Program here at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. The overall goal of our residency program is to prepare newly licensed nurses to reach competency as a nurse, as an oncology nurse, and as a research nurse. Our residency program spans a duration of 12 months, and the curriculum is structured to expose the residents to fundamental clinical nursing skills, oncology-based care, and research nursing competencies. The residents participate in both live classroom modules as well as online educational series from ONS. The residents complete a total of 5 clinical rotations. They do 5 weeks in inpatient oncology, 8 weeks in outpatient oncology on our infusion floor, and they do 3 different clinical research rotations. To supplement these clinical experiences, residents are provided a wide variety of interdisciplinary shadow experiences and professional development opportunities. Sheridan Aspinwall, a 2019 graduate of the program, and Katie Bretta, one of our current residents, are here today to share with us their perspective of the program.
Hi everyone, my name is Sheridan. I am a graduate of the 2018 to 2019 cohort of the Research Nurse Residency Program for newly licensed nurses at Dana-Farber. I just wanted to briefly talk about the transition to practice and what that has been like. In addition to the foundational courses and knowledge in research nursing and oncology nursing gained throughout the program, we really got a great education in just the myriad resources that the Institute has to offer our patients, how to collaborate with other professionals in the workplace, and kind of how to navigate these complexities of research and of the care that we give to patients. So after graduation from the program, I transitioned to a position in the thoracic oncology program, so working with lung cancer patients. It's a really busy practice with about 50 active protocols at a given time. I work with a team of 4 other nurses, and it's been definitely an education, but I felt really well prepared by the residency program to just kind of jump right in, and having a really good foundation of the research knowledge allowed me to focus on getting disease-specific knowledge and really kind of coming at it swinging. So since I started that position about July of 2019, kind of transitioning, I've also recently started precepting the next generation of the residency program, which has been wonderful to kind of see that come full circle. And I'm really excited to see what comes next. Thanks so much.
Hi, my name is Katie Bretta, and I'm one of the NLMs from this year's cohort. I started at Dana-Farber this past September, and I'm currently in my first research intensive rotation in the gastrointestinal group. As for the thing that I feel like I've gained most from this residency program, being able to rotate through inpatient and infusion to see what those nurses need from a research nurse when caring for a patient in trial was incredibly helpful, but truly being able to see the full circle of care and what is required of patients when they sign on trial, I think has better equipped me as a future research nurse, which I will be coming this September, and I'm excited to be able to use the skills that this program has allowed me to create a foundation for in oncology and nursing in general, and especially in research.
Okay, thank you. And our next segment is highlighting the Clinical Research Center and our Phase 1 Clinical Research Center. So I would like to introduce Terry Mazeka and Katie Buckley. Terry, if you can introduce yourself and your position here at Dana-Farber.
Yes, hi, welcome. I'm Terry Mazeka. I'm the nurse director of Yawkey 6 Infusion, and we do the Phase 1 clinical trials in an ambulatory setting. And we PK, first time human use drugs, PK collection, EKGs, vital signs, and other data collection.
Thank you. And Katie?
Hi, I'm Katie Buckley. I'm an infusion nurse and charge nurse on Yaki 6. So I get to see both sides of how the floor runs, and yeah.
Great. Okay, so our first question is for Terry. Terry, how does the Clinical Research Center on Yaki 6 support Dana-Farber Cancer Institute's research mission?
Well, research is a very strong part of Dana-Farber. We're a comprehensive cancer center. We're partnership with Harvard University, so we have a lot of academia. We look to innovate, and that's our way of giving our fight against cancer. We're constantly trying to develop new and novel therapies and share them through research. And yeah.
Great. And Katie, this question is for you. What is the process for research drug administration on the Clinical Research Center unit?
Here at Dana-Farber, we have a lot of checks and balances. So the patient generally has their labs drawn, sees a provider, and then checks in with the infusion side of nursing. And that's when the nurse who takes care of them starts looking at labs and has the protocol up on the computer, going through inclusion criteria, exclusion criteria, and just making sure that the patient meets all of the criteria and everything in order to treat this patient. So the provider will have already checked all of this, given us a good to go, but we also do our due diligence by checking as well. We then give our pharmacists the good to go, making sure our drugs are, the right dose, the right route, and all of that. They go through the same process that we do in regards to checking labs according to the protocol. They do one pharmacist does that, then they have a double verification in the pharmacy. That then gets sent to our central pharmacy where the drugs are actually made up. And then the drugs are either mixed based on if they're IV or, their pill bottles are pulled appropriately. They're then sent up to the floor where the infusion nurse picks it up, brings it into the patient's room, brings the computer up, scans the patient and the drug, double verifying the name, date of birth, and medical record number. And then you have a blind double verification. Another nurse comes in and does the same thing as you, double checks the drug, the patient, the date of birth, and MRN, and make sure that we also set up the pump if it's an infusion so that the second nurse can double check to make sure that the drug is running at the correct time as well. And even if it's a pill, they still double check that and make sure that they have the correct number of pills at the correct dose. And then the drug is given to the patient, and the patient is monitored based on what the protocol requires us to.
Great. Thank you so much. That was very thorough and appreciated. Thank you. And now we will be discussing the Research Nurse Practice Committee at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. I'll introduce our first co-chair today and talk about the purpose of the Research Nurse Practice Committee. Patty, can you introduce yourself to the audience?
Hi, my name is Patty McHugh. I'm a research nurse at Dana-Farber, and I work in the head and neck group.
Thanks, Patty. What is the purpose of the Research Nurse Practice Committee at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute?
The Research Nurse Practice Committee provides a forum for research nurses to define, shape, and promote research nurse practice at Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, Dana-Farber's inpatient unit at Brigham and Women's and Children's Hospital, and the DFCI satellites and affiliates. The committee utilizes the knowledge and the expertise of research nurses to identify and promote strategies to assure excellence in the management of complex clinical trials.
Great, thank you so much. And our second co-chair is Mark. And Mark, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Mark Zawin. I'm co-chair of the committee and a research nurse in the GI group.
Great. So Mark, how does the Research Nurse Practice Committee align with the shared governance model at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute?
The RNPC is accountable to the Dana-Farber Nursing Council. Nursing Council is the highest governance body within the nursing department. Its membership is comprised of 2 to 3 council chairs and nursing council members. Each council member represents a nursing unit or division or a nursing role, and the nurse committee and therefore represents the collective voice of all DFCI nurses. The Research Practice Committee recommends practice and operational policy changes to the council through the nurse director, the co-chairs of the RNPC committee, as well as research nurses who sit on the nursing council.
This is so great to hear, and thank you both so much for all your hard work and dedication to the research nursing practice at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. Have a great day.
Thank you for joining us today. I'd like to start by introducing our Dana-Farber Cancer Institute clinical trial nursing team. We have Heidi DePietro, Peg Lance, Joan Luca, Rachel Patchell, and Kelly O'Neill here with us today. Heidi, tell me what the role of the clinical nurse entails.
Hi, as clinical trial nurses, we are responsible for doing feasibility reviews from a nursing standpoint for all newly submitted protocols and all amendments. During this review, we create and update the DFCI protocol education sheet for the infusion nurses, and we create and update the alert pages for each submission. We also report to and present at the BWH or Brigham and Women's Dana-Farber Inpatient Nursing Pharmacy Committee to apprise all members of upcoming inpatient trials.
Peg, what committees are the clinical trial nurses involved with?
The CTNs participate in 5 IRB panels here at Dana-Farber, where we're responsible for completing and presenting the protocol continuing reviews.
What does a day in the life of the CTN look like?
CTNs are responsible for 4 to 5 assigned disease centers here at Dana-Farber, and we attend their individual disease center research meetings in collaboration with physicians, research nurses, and clinical research coordinators. CTNs monitor and send routine reports of the activation status for new and amended trials.
Rachel, what is the review process of a protocol?
Protocol is submitted to OHRS for review through our protocol management system called IRIS. It is then voted upon by a panel of diverse experts at our scientific review committee, and then our institutional review board. Once approved, ODQ activates the protocol and uploads it to OncPro for use by our clinical teams.
Kelly, what is the value of the CTN role at Dana-Farber?
So our role is to identify and clarify any ambiguities in the protocol prior to its activation. So once it gets to clinic, all the nurses and clinical providers are very clear what needs to be done and how to do it on cycle 1, day 1.
Great. Thank you all for learning and meeting our team members.
Hello, my name is Alyssa Gentile, and I am the Research Nurse Manager of the Satellite Research Nurses. Dana-Farber extends its reach to the west, north, and south of Boston through our satellite sites. These satellite sites allow the Institute to bring knowledge, research, and care to greater numbers of patients beyond the Longwood medical area. Each center is unique in size and offerings. The research nurse collaborates with the satellite physicians and is responsible for the implementation and evaluation of clinical research in their specific program or area. The nurses participate in the Division of Nursing Institute committees at the main DFCI Longwood campus, including but not limited to the monthly Research Nurse Practice Committee meeting. We currently have 6 research nurses, 1 at each site and 2 in the Weymouth site. Each research nurse is responsible for the trials that are open at their individual site. Trials at the satellites are typically phase 2 and phase 3 studies and include both treatment and non-treatment studies of solid tumor and hematological malignancies. These nurses are part of the Dana-Farber research nursing team, allowing them to have the same resources and opportunities as the Boston campus. Stephanie Freeman, one of our research nurses at our Londonderry, New Hampshire site, is here today to tell us why she enjoys being a research nurse in the community setting. Hi, my name is Stephanie and I'm the research nurse at the Dana-Farber Satellite Campus in Londonderry, New Hampshire. We're located 45 minutes from Boston. I enjoy being a research nurse for Dana-Farber because it allows me to be involved in the latest treatment advances for our oncology patients. Working at the satellite campus is a bit different than working at the main campus in Boston. The research nurses in Boston focus on one disease specialty, like breast or lung cancer. In the satellites, we only have one research nurse at most locations because we have a lower patient volume, so we're able to be involved in all disease groups, which can certainly be more challenging at times, but has also personally been a great learning opportunity for me. We're also personally involved in vetting the trials for our location to be sure they are trials we can accrue to with our specific patient population and to be sure we have the appropriate staff and resources available at our site to properly carry out the trial. I'm proud to have this location available to our patients who live in the area so they don't have to drive into Boston for treatment when they're already feeling sick and fatigued, as peak commute times can significantly add on to the time they may need to spend sitting in traffic. I enjoy being able to work in the community that I live in, but still be connected to a renowned institution like Dana-Farber.
I'm just going to stop sharing for a second. There you go.
Thanks, Cam. Thank you, Cam, and everybody at Dana-Farber. That was just really awesome. Really awesome. Really nice to see the outside of the facility. And just, I don't know if it was, probably wasn't really clear from all the videos that we showed in the pictures, but the medical, what's called the Longwood Medical Area in Boston is comprised of a bunch of different hospitals, including Brigham and Women's, the Dana-Farber Children's, the Beth Israel, New England Baptist Hospital, and a couple of other places. Harvard Medical School is there, and we're all so close to each other that it's like 2 or 3 city blocks. Cam's office is probably closer to my office and some of the other people that I work with at Children's. So we're all very close, and all of those things that you saw outside are very close together. So it's kind of a good camaraderie thing too that we have going on there. It's just that the whole area, well, not so much during the pandemic when traffic is at a minimum, but it's really pulsing with people most of the time and traffic. And you can just sort of feel the excitement in the air of all the great things that are happening there. Sorry, I just realized I stopped my video probably while I was eating lunch. I think that Cam said that Kristen is here to answer some questions. So if people have questions, you can put them in the chat, or I guess we can unmute people if they want to ask questions.
Yeah, if people let me know they want to say something, I can't seem to unmute everyone. I can mute you all, but I can't unmute you all at once.
To start the questions from the beginning, how are research nurses paid in comparison to clinical nurses at these hospitals?
So I can answer for Dana-Farber. So Dana-Farber is a unionized hospital, so we actually pay everybody on the same scale, and it's according to years of experience. So it doesn't matter if you're an infusion nurse or a research nurse, every nurse that's in the union gets paid the same wage, no matter the role, for years of experience. Any other questions?
Are there other questions for the Dana-Farber nurses? Guess not. Great presentation. I think you answered all their questions. Kristen, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
No, I think that pretty much covered it. I just appreciate being invited to participate. It was great to see everybody and be a part of this. I was able to do the UK visit when we could do it in person, and it was fabulous. So, you know, it's nice to be able to connect again across all these countries to do this. But I can't wait till we get to do it again in person. Our community CRN is becoming more common in the US. I would say yes, at least for our area, because many of the hospitals, like I know MGH went earlier, they also have satellite locations. And here we're part of the National Cancer Institute. We have, you know, funds and grants from them. And as part of that, part of our responsibility for being an NCI designated cancer institute is that we have to help promote access to cancer care, and that includes cancer clinical trials out into areas where it wouldn't otherwise be accessible. So we take that pretty seriously, and that's part of our mission with our satellites. And in addition to the satellites, I'm taking this a little bit of a deep dive here, but Alyssa can pipe in. We also collaborate with our affiliates. So what that means is, while they're not a part of Dana-Farber in terms of being owned and operated by us, we do allow access to our clinical trial portfolio to certain other hospitals that have affiliations with us. That way it gets our cancer care even further out into some communities like rural Maine. We have some in Rhode Island, in Connecticut. So we allow places, other states, to have access to our clinical trial portfolio so that they can have access to treatment they may not otherwise have.
Let's see. Are there any other questions?
I can unmute you if you just let me know. It'd be nice to have a little chit chat if you'd rather.
Okay, I can promote some chit chat here. Do you guys have roles like the clinical trial nurses that we have here? So that means research nurses, and we purposely call them clinical trials nurses so that we don't confuse them with our clinical research nurses. So the clinical trial nurses, as you heard, they're a great resource because we have 5 regulatory clinical trial nurses, and all they do is take protocols and really pick them apart, critique them, and make sure that we can operationalize them safely in the clinic. So that piece of work has been taken away from our clinical research nurses in the disease center, just because they have way too many patients to be able to take the time and really focus on the clinical trials and amendments like they need to. And then they also sign off on, they also create an education sheet for each trial. So I can see Fiona is saying that yours are one and the same, clinical trials and research nurses. Yeah, that's how ours used to be too. We got too big, we couldn't do it anymore.
We're pretty big. So we've got about 300 nurses and delivery staff. And I guess out of that, it's probably 270 are nurses. And then the others are clinical trials assistants who are junior to the nurses working in their teams without a nursing qualification. So yeah, that's still how we operate. What we have done is taken away a lot of the project management responsibility, the setup of studies, the costings, certainly. The feasibility is a combination done with the project management team, but a lot of the paperwork side of things, coordinating amendments and things like that, are done by the project management team.
So what do the clinical trial assistants do?
So they are clinical. We have trials administrators who are junior to them who aren't clinical, but the clinical staff would work under the supervision after a period of training, depending on their background. They would come and work within the team, supported by the nurses, to undertake basic research interventions. Some of our best venisectors are the CTAs, but they do data entry. They don't give drugs, but they do quite a few. They can be trained up in many interventions that are required for a big varied portfolio of studies of all different disease areas. So it's very much, they'd be trained probably on 1 or 2 studies and work underneath the supervision of the nursing team.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. And then
Although
Fiona.
across the UK, there are staff who are more senior than that as clinical trials practitioners. That's a whole new group of staff that are a profession that's being created with a registration in order to ensure the delivery of studies because of the nursing shortage. So people have employed staff who aren't nurses at more senior levels. And now there's this new program to ensure that they have the training and support they need to advance.
So these are not nurses, they're not RNs?
Yeah.
Okay, so they're training lay people to do the clinical trial work?
Yeah.
Okay.
So a lot of them are science graduates. So there's a big program, it's clinical research practitioners. And if you Google that within IHR, you would get a lot of information online about that.
Are there other ways that anyone on the call is solving their shortage of clinical research nurses? I mean, you guys heard us about the residency, and Jennifer's telling us about the clinical trial practitioners. Has anyone come up with any other ideas to solve the shortage?
Just seeing in the chat, Nona saying we have a variety, psychologists, scientists. Log on Wednesday and she'll be talking more about that.
Okay, no, that's interesting.
So if there's no more questions.
I don't know, sorry, Andrea, I don't know if you can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you, Gordon, go ahead.
Hi, yeah. I know it's something that I kind of bang the drum about, but I think one other thing that we've been thinking about is engaging with our nursing students to try and make sure that you have more clinical research nurses in the next generation. It seems to be certainly in the UK that research in university setting, at college setting, tends to be fairly limited and quite theoretical. Excuse me, sorry, that's my puppy whining in the background. So what I think is a really good opportunity is to try to engage with nursing colleges to try to make sure that they incorporate careers in research as part of their research and evidence-based practice curriculum. So I think that might be another option to consider.
Yeah, we're doing that at NIHR. We're piloting a scheme that includes a slide set that will go out to higher education organizations and sites as well, where there are student placements, so that they can get this exposure to clinical research nursing in a coherent way.
That's great. We worked on the slide deck here in the US too. So if you need that, we can pass that along.
It'd be good to see it.
Yeah.
Ours is too big. That's why we're piloting it. I inherited it, and we're just having a look to see what it looks like on the ground for people.
This is the one that came out from the IACRN School of Nursing Work Group? No? Okay.
No, this is an IHR. This is
okay.
The Clinical Research Network here.
We can get the other one to you.
Yeah, that would be great. Time to go, apparently.
Okay. I don't see any other questions for the Dana-Farber group. Thank you, Kristen, Cam, and your whole cast of characters who put together that awesome video. That was great. We have another video coming up. This is an interview with some of the founding members of the Boston IACRN chapter here. Don't want to age them too much, but I'm going to guess that between them, they probably have like 1,000 years of experience. So Cam, I think that's you.
Can you all see that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Or did it just take me off? Let me know if you can hear this.
So I'm Jen Hedgelin, and this is Linda Pittler, and we are doing a research interview so that all of you can kind of see the different backgrounds and trajectories of where we've all come from. So today we're just going to have a very casual chat about what we do and
kind of how this chapter evolved. So Linda, I guess my first question for you is, how did you get involved in research?
I got involved in research in 1996 when I left the neonatal ICU and went directly into business, which was the strangest transition ever.
Interestingly enough, so didn't I.
Yeah, it was, I'd never worked in a business environment. I'm like, okay. So the first 4 months I was there, I did data management and I absolutely hated it. And then the company was doing a study with Procter & Gamble on a novel antiarrhythmic, and they got wind of a nurse in data management. And even though the company policy was you couldn't change your job until you'd been there for 6 months, P&G wanted a nurse for their drug safety. So I got scooped out of data management and plopped into pharmacovigilance, which I also really didn't know anything about. And for the next 18 months, I was the nurse responsible for this huge phase 3B trial. I had all of the sites in North America, and that included Canada.
Isn't it crazy how it just comes about?
Yeah, I had all of the sites in South America, and I had all the sites in Mexico. So I was doing pharmacovigilance on like 60, 70 sites all by myself, and I was obviously drowning.
Alone. I can't even imagine.
And I knew it was time to leave when my older son, who was a junior in high school at the time, looked at me one night after another dinner of pizza and said, "I'm never going to get another home-cooked meal out of my mother again." And I said, "All right, that's it." And I went in and I resigned the next day.
It's interesting you touch on that. I think, a lot of people go into nursing because of those flexible schedules and those kind of things. And it's it's really a vocation when you work in research. And
Absolutely.
So I can totally relate to that.
Was off for a few months decompressing. And then I went, if I remember, it's not a long time ago, to Fenway Community Health. And I was there for a couple of years doing AIDS research. And, the nice thing I think about research nursing is all of the different venues and illnesses and things that you can cover. So stayed there for a while. So from there, I went to the Scapin's Eye Research Institute and did diabetic retinopathy research. And I was there for 5 years. And that was a I had a great job. I had a novel investigator. During that time, I was able to work and get my master's degree. So once that grant ran out, I was interviewed for a job at MGH for the Thoracic Aortic Center. Again, moving into.
So now you're into cardiac.
I was.
Oh my gosh.
I did that. That was a decade. And that was, again, different studies for me. And when that ended, because there was no more money, I was able to move into my current position, which is the medical navigation nurse for the football players research health study at Harvard, where we bring in former NFL players into town. We turn them inside out for 2.5 days. We screen them with 14 different assessments. And at the end of that time, the participants sit down with me and a study doctor, and we go over all of the available results that we've gotten from their 2.5 days. And what makes us different is that if there's something that is clinically relevant and actionable, we give that result back to our participant to bring back to their primary care physician.
Yeah, and get the care they need.
Exactly. So that's been my job for almost 3 years.
And it's so important to hear these types of experiences. So in our meeting, we go over all these things we can do and all the ways we can be innovative. And, But really, I think now, research nursing itself is taking such a turn. It's very progressive. It's like you said, like, look how your career evolved. And, I think there's a lot of people who want to get into it right away out of school, but they just don't know how. And they, usually you need some floor experience, and, you kind of need to know how to be a nurse, but you also need to learn this whole specialty of research itself. And, you're really a multifaceted person that wears a lot of hats. And I think this is just so awesome that you're talking to us, because we really want to share this with just a lot of different types of nurses. People have been nurses forever, but they want to break into something new, or there's people who have always had a strong desire to get into research. And, I have 2 coworkers who were actually research coordinators before they were nurses. And then there's the people who fall into so I think this is just so wonderful that you're able to share all these amazing experiences, and the way that you were able to just hop around to each thing, but it wasn't effortless. It takes time.
No, it takes time.
It's a labor of love,
It does. It takes time. It takes interviews. It takes lots of deep breaths and crossing your fingers. I mean, for this current job, I interviewed with 12 different people.
I believe it. And, the market is competitive in itself. And then I think to kind of penetrate that, you really need to, a lot of people don't really even understand what research nursing is.
Exactly.
You think you have an idea before you apply for the job. And, we always hear of the nurse scientists, but actually, that other end of employing that research is really where, I think there's a lot of mystery of what does that entail? And
exactly.
How did you get there?
And what's the IRB? What does regulatory mean? So yeah, there's a lot to learn. And I think, at least for me, you kind of fall into these jobs.
Of course.
And then you're like, okay. I honest to God, when I started at MGH in the Thoracic Aortic Center, I knew what an aneurysm was. I knew what a dissection was. But that was basically it.
Not to the granular level you're at,
And actually, that has served me really well, because one of the other things I was able to loop into with another doctor was genetics, because so much of thoracic aortic disease has a genetic base.
And who would know that unless you're in the weeds of that profession? I mean, this is the cutting edge stuff that we want to share with our peers, because this is amazing.
Yeah, it's served me very well, because we have, these are big guys, they're former NFL players, and we've, one of the assessments they get is an echo. And we're like, oh, you should probably bring this back to your doctor and get a cardiology consult. So it's been good. It's been a good trajectory, lots to learn. And I would highly recommend for anybody who thinks they want to get into research nursing that they get a good year or 2 of unit experience, because you're going to need it.
Yes. And, me and my other coworker always say how jealous we are. They've come out with these new research nurse right out of school programs, the newly licensed nursing programs. And they're more than a regular nurse residency. Even when I graduated, it was the recession, residencies weren't even a thing yet. I had to go to different parts of the country essentially to get my experience. And, it's like you said, I had an interesting trajectory as well. And I feel like I picked up skills and, experiences all along the way that really, helped me kind of work into my phase 1 group that I work in now. And, but I will say they've come so far. And even the residencies, people don't even know about, they don't even realize that you can do that in research. But, the double-edged sword there is you're learning 2 specialties of nursing at the same time as a new nurse. And, so those people are definitely have to feel like it's their vocation.
Exactly. It can be really challenging and overwhelming.
Now, when you went from, because, we kind of touched upon that you did research and you did it in different specialties. Now, when you swapped, say from like cardiac to what you're doing now, how long did it take you to feel comfortable in that specialty?
It took a while because the biggest thing I had to get used to, was working with a team.
Yes.
I mean, I was alone for
because
so long.
Right. And we hear this all the time.
And all of a sudden there were people and I was like,
yes.
You mean I don't have to do the IRB regulatory stuff? Oh my God. So it took a while to get used to working with a team, but everything that I learned I've been a nurse now, this is 44 years.
Amazing.
So everything that I have learned in those 44 years, I use in my day-to-day job.
Yeah, you never lose it.
It's a lot of communication with our participants. It's a lot of communication with their primary care doctors.
Right.
So it's transitioned to what I would say is applicable to like being an outpatient nurse.
Yeah.
But everything I've learned in this career in some way I use, which is why I think it's so important that if you want to get into research, you need a good base of knowledge. So spending some time on a med-surg unit, on a surgical unit is eventually going to serve you very well.
Right.
If you like pediatrics, then spend time in the pediatric unit because you can do pediatric research, but you will have that base of knowledge.
Understanding where that can kind of go. I totally agree. Now, how did you get involved in the chapter?
Mary Larkin is a very good friend, and she looked when I was working in Scapins. It was a joint research project with the diabetes unit at MGH. Mary was their manager at the time. I will never forget this. I was over there looking for labs, and she
Of course, that's why you were there. It's always something.
And she looked at me, she stopped me in the hall and she looked at me and she said, "We're starting a research roundtable. I expect you to be there." Like, okay. And we did. We started a research nurse roundtable. We met once a month, every couple of months. People would present on what they were doing. We would review journal articles. So I was involved with that for a while, and then it transitioned to IACRN had their first meeting in Boston at Children's.
Yes.
So we all went to that, joined IACRN, and Mary is such a driving force, and she's like, "We're going to be the first chapter." I'm like, okay. So 5 of us.
We're always the first to do everything here.
5 of us met. Lauren was from the Brigham, Amy, Catherine, Mary, and I were all from MGH. We met for a year, planning out what, who, when, and then finally we had a feasibility meeting.
Yeah.
And we invited research nurses from all over the city, and we got to see if there was interest.
Yeah.
In a chapter. And so we had about 30 people show up for that feasibility meeting. So we're like, oh, okay, this could actually
had a following before there was Instagram, before there was Facebook. You had your own following.
Exactly. And it just kind of evolved from there. We came up with a process.
Sorry, everyone. We just had a glitch and then again, I'm just going to restart.
Loop in people through Zoom and they can attend meetings, and it's been a good experience. And I learned a lot. I mean, I went from being the chair of that research nurse roundtable to the president of the chapter for 2 years. And it was like, yeah, I don't have any experience doing this. It was
again, more learning curves. I feel like research is all learning curves.
It is all learning. And so I learned how to do that. I learned how to write an article. We published. So the time that I have spent with IACRN has not been in vain.
Right.
It's, you know, it's given me friends. It's given me colleagues that are all over the world now.
Right.
Because we're so internationally based. And I would encourage anybody who is just thinking about it to join. It'll be nice when we can actually have in-person meetings again.
Of course. To really do these exchanges. And,
exactly.
You know, I hope this is one of many to come. You know, we're trying to get, you know, as we come into this new normal, you know, we really want to bring it all back together. And, you know, I think we're going to hear such a diverse and robust portfolio of experiences that people have had over the past year and a half, you know?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, it's just going to be incredible to see how they dealt with those in COVID. Because, you know, we keep hearing about COVID research itself, but then what it was like to be a research nurse during COVID, you know, was really complex. And, you know, I think it's going to be so amazing, you know, as we keep doing these to really get everyone, you know, to get to know each other, new members, former members, pioneers, you know. Exactly. So I think we're just about time.
Okay.
Thank you so much for all your time, and
it was my pleasure.
Appreciate it, and more to come.
All right, take care. Have a good weekend.
Thank you. You too. Hi, everybody. So our interview part 2, this is Sheila Driscoll, and I'm Jen Hedgeland. And Sheila, thank you so much for doing this with us today. You're such a valued member of the community, and we're definitely interested to hear about your experiences. Tell us how you got into research.
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me. This is a pleasure. I will tell you, currently I'm retired, but my heart is still connected to research. Back in the late 80s, I was working as a nurse manager for a large surgical unit, about 46 beds, in a community hospital. And I really felt like I wanted to expand. And so I looked in. I was talking to my friends, and I had a couple of friends that worked in Boston, and they were kind of scouting around for me. And there was some positions at the Brigham and Women's Hospital, which I had to go on a map because I really didn't even know where that was. You know, when you live in the North Shore, you know.
Right.
What I did, I wasn't confident in one of the positions. It was an ICU, but the other position was the nurse manager for a clinical research center. And that sounded pretty exciting, very different. And so long story short, I got the job. And
wow.
Honestly, the job grew around me. I didn't really feel a need to look elsewhere after 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, stayed there 35 years.
That is just so incredible. I mean, that's what everyone hopes for, you know?
Yeah, it's very unusual, you know, certainly nowadays. But as I said, the job grew around me, and the projects, the Clinical Research Center actually supports all types of research, not a specialty, although we had a lot of endocrinology because that really was the only unit where physicians could admit a patient with an endocrine issue. Most of those patients were seen out in an outpatient setting.
Right.
But we had oncology, neurology, some oncology patients that would have been seen outpatient, but because of the intricate data collection, they ended up. And
so they were all under one umbrella?
So they were all admitted under their own, well, I shouldn't say service, but their own research physician who was the specialist.
Interesting.
But they were all on one unit. And so the staff really had to expand their skills. And, some of the protocols took a little training. We had some postpartum protocols, and people were really anxious.
Yeah,
but,
I bet.
I think just with the nature of research, you do have generally enough time to, ask your questions, do some extra training and reading. And by the time the patients were admitted, people were ready.
Right.
Yeah. So, but that's what really intrigued me, was that any week you could be reading a brand new protocol, with a whole new patient population.
Which is so impressive, because it's like one thing to have one specialty, but when it's so many, I mean, what a pivot.
Yes, exactly. So.
And did you find that expanded over time? Like, did it keep growing and growing?
Well, I think what was happening was hospitalizations were becoming more and more expensive. So to admit a patient to utilize an inpatient bed and stay for 3, 4, 5 days was exorbitant. And initially the grant covered everything. So when I started working, the NIH had a grant called General Clinical Research Center Award. And probably 75 between 70 and 75 medical centers across the US applied for these grants, and they were a 5-year award, and it provided staffing, inpatient, outpatient costs, some coverage for ancillaries. I mean, it was incredible. But as hospital costs went up, those awards could not keep up. And long story short, that turned over into a brand new program. And I'm blanking on our center was called Catalyst, but it was a Clinical Translational Science Award. That's what it was. So in any case, the new grant, Clinical Translational Science Award, became the new infrastructure award that most of the centers applied for and received. But it changed dramatically how centers were run. Because
I imagine, yeah. And we never hear about that. It's interesting to see all the iterations that have happened in just a short amount of time.
Yes. And quite a bit of scrambling, how centers really wanted to encourage young investigators who really are so early in their career. They don't have a lot of work to display to get awards. And so, it was a struggle. And it was, I tried to stay out of the money business, but kept on getting dragged into it.
Oh, they always find a way to add another hat to nurses.
Oh gosh, yeah, it was something. But
yeah, we see that a lot. I think especially now, I mean, I'm in a phase 1 group, and, even from when I started just a couple years ago, to see the protocols that have come up now, the intricacies that you mentioned are almost making a comeback. And we're kind of seeing those hospital budgets built in again. And I mean, it's a lot on a patient, and it's a lot of money, and it's very interesting to see from a regulatory standpoint, and then also just, from an implementation standpoint, it's a lot. So when you mentioned like the different taxonomies and all the different groups, I mean, I can imagine that was a big undertaking.
Yes, it was. I think probably, or maybe mine, I should say, not ours, challenge was we inherited and adopted, maybe is a better word, the vision of circadian and sleep medicine. And to do sleep research on normal volunteers. So these weren't patients with disease entities. These were volunteers, generally young, between 20 and 40. And they would be staying in sleep protocols anywhere from generally 2 weeks to as long as our longest protocol was 73 days.
Wow. Oh my goodness.
And these subjects were isolated. They had their own little studio, so to speak. And
wow.
Their entire day was, I shouldn't say controlled, but it was managed. Yeah. And so the lights went on and went off by computer. Their neurobehavioral testing, cognitive testing was all computerized and automated, and
almost like a sim lab, it sounds like.
Yes, oh, very much so. And the staff was mostly technicians who were, newly college educated, 4-year graduates,
right,
who had an interest in medicine or biology or psychology, and they had to be trained to place EEG electrodes, take vital signs.
Man, we complain now, but that's
I know. It was, it was incredible. And they were so motivated. I really enjoyed working with them. They really were a wonderful group.
Well, I imagine everybody was really invested in that particular project,
Yes. And there were 5 suites. And so there was a charge nurse around the clock. And it was it was something else. I struggled to find the right words.
Well, I'm just thinking like what it must have been like, you started out your career in nursing at one point, and then you kind of pivot to research, and then you kind of end up in this lane. I mean, it really just shows you how dynamic the role can become.
Yes,
I mean, that's amazing.
Exactly.
And these are the types of stories, and I know we kind of touched on this before in the other interview, but where we have so many people who are really trying to break into nursing research and really trying to make a career for themselves in this, these are the stories that like everyone loves to hear, because, we all obviously, we're a little more siloed now as research has kind of, become more robust. But, it's nice, when you can hear just about different types of research and kind of how things have kind of come and gone, and then also just come back. So,
exactly.
There's a lot of parallels. And, I think for a lot of people, we never really get to have these kind of discussions, just, casually, there's just not a lot of time in the day for them. And, they're really amazing. So I guess my other question for you is how was it like to pivot back and forth between the different specialties?
I don't think well, it's like anything in life. It's the people.
Yeah.
So, you could be working with the most challenging protocol, but if you feel like you're part of the team,
right,
it's not as onerous.
So true. So it really makes it or breaks it. That's such a great point. It really is. And then how did you come about joining this chapter? Like, how did you put those together, you know, kind of going from that and then joining this chapter? And then you also held a role in it.
Well, the real story goes back to the early 90s. I won't date myself too much. I spoke earlier about the General Clinical Research Center, and the leadership in Washington actually asked each of the leaders, that would be the program directors, administrators, and the nurse managers, to gather once a year for 2 or 3 days.
Wow.
And really share best practices.
Awesome.
And it was wonderful. It was just nurse managers, which is a limitation. However, we got a lot out of it, and it was a fabulous group. When that award dissolved and the Clinical Translational Science Award began, there wasn't a meeting of that sort maintained. So a small group got together and decided that we really needed to begin an organization that would actually support not only leadership, nursing managers, but the individual research nurse. And so began the IACRN. And that there's many in the leadership circle still really supporting that, and you probably see their names at the annual meetings. And so I was part of the original General Clinical Research Center nurse manager group, and I worked with a nursing manager, Mary Williams, out of Beth Israel. She and I spearheaded that association for the first 2 or 3 years. So this is kind of an evolution over time. Right. So I don't feel like I really joined the chapter. I think I just grew and evolved with the chapter. And so when
and it's awesome because there's really no, you know, we can read about things or know about things, but when it's the people who actually were who were involved in building this, I mean, that's where you get to hear the real stories and the real history, you know, and that's kind of why we're doing this. I mean, it's just awesome. And you made a place for people like me, you know?
And Jennifer Allison, the current president, she actually was part of the UK group that was invited to come to the States just as things were changing. I believe a couple of nurse managers came to Washington during the GCR, we call it GCRC, annual meetings, and they, you know, agreed that maintaining a clinical research nursing association was vital, and it should, you know, expand beyond the different countries and really be international. So yeah, she's actually part of the history as well. Yeah, she tells a story. I don't know that it's fully true, that I was at a meeting that the UK group was having in Scotland, and there was a dinner one evening, and they actually had what they call a ceilidh, which is a dinner dance. And she says, at the dance, you were dancing with the chief, the program director, and spinning him around. I'm like, I really don't recall it that way. But
oh my goodness.
It's a funny story.
Well, we love those stories too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, you know, there should be fun. And I think that's the other thing, is that I think a lot of clinical research nurses can talk about really a lot of stress and, you know, time pressures. but a lot of fun as well, and a lot of special moments, whether it's with colleagues or with special patients or protocols that just they're meaningful.
I feel like you just hit every touch milestone you could hit right there in that one sentence. This is so true.
Yeah.
It's a dynamic role, and there's a lot that goes into it and a lot of hats. And I think we were saying before, we've said this in our meetings, that there's a lot of people who want to get into nursing research, but they don't really even know what it is. It's hard to imagine what that looks like, And
yes.
I think that all those points are really what touch on that,
Exactly.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely amazing. And, I hope we continue to have more of these conversations in the future. I think there's just so many people who will benefit from this. And also it's really nice for us that, we're still learning the chapter. I mean, it's like I said, we can read the PowerPoint and people can talk about it a little bit, but when we have these conversations, that's where we really hear, basically all the good stories,
Yes.
how that kind
Oh
of
yeah.
happened.
No, I think these kind of dialogues, chats are really valuable.
Absolutely.
And I think you for the interviewer and interviewee, you can feel the energy and passion and excitement. And I think, to your point, someone new to the specialty or thinking about it, even if they walk away still not knowing what the job is, because it does change.
Oh yeah.
Especially if you're in a general unit like we were.
Right.
Today you did one thing, but tomorrow you might be working with some other
and nursing
specialty.
evolves as itself too. I mean, it's constantly, is this part of evolution basically, we keep seeing everything, just keep progressing, and, we're always kind of the first to do it here, in New England. So.
Yeah, exactly.
But I really appreciate you meeting with us. And, as I said, we'll be sharing this. So, we appreciate all your time, and, hopefully we can get some type of panel or roundtable in the future to really, have more of these conversations.
Exactly. That would be great. Look forward to that.
Well, Sheila, thank you so much for everything. And I think this is going to wrap up our actual session. So, the entire exchange. So I guess this will be it, and we'll move on to a Q&A after your interview. So.
Okay. All right. Sounds great. Thanks again.
Thanks, Sheila.
It was a pleasure.
Yes, thanks, you too.
Okay, I hope everyone enjoyed that trip down memory lane from two very, very experienced clinical research nurses here in the Boston area. And we have a comment from Gordon saying he remembered going to the GCRC conferences in 1997. Sorry, I guess you outed yourself there on your age, Gordon. So I don't know if people know the history of the GCRC, but that was, I alluded to this earlier, that was the General Clinical Research Center. That was a federal grant from the National Institutes of Health Care, and it morphed into what was the Clinical and Translational Study Awards, and then our administration, and then the Clinical and Translational Study Units, which focused more on, the General Clinical Research Centers were really clinically based. I don't know, someone who worked in them can chime in if they want, but they were more clinically based, and this is, the CTSUs are more translational science based, so that, trying to get drugs from the lab, the bench to the bedside. And that's kind of what it's morphed into. And as I said, all of the Harvard teaching hospitals here, and that includes all of the hospitals represented today, belong to the same group. So we have one award for the entire Longwood medical area, and the Mass General. And I think that those are the only ones that are in it. Anyway, does anyone have any questions or things that they'd like to ask me, Cam, or anyone else? I see actually Jen has joined us, and Amy Sprola, who has had a huge role in IACRN here in Boston over the last few years, has joined us. If there's any questions anybody has, please put something in the chat or ask to be unmuted. So I don't see anything.
Sorry, I just
Hi,
unmuted Gordon.
Go ahead, Gordon.
Hi, yeah, I was raising a virtual hand there. Yeah, I did kind of out my age when saying I went to the GCRC conference in '97, and there was a number of us from the UK went over to those conferences, and it really helped to kind of build an international community of clinical research nursing, and I think it obviously led on to the development of the IACRN. But I think before that point, you know, there was a tendency for clinical research nursing to be seen in the either a state or a country-wide context. But really from there, it's been a springboard to think about clinical research nursing in a global context. And I think the sessions that we've had so far, and also the sessions that we're still to have, really are amazing. I was telling someone in an email today, you know, that somebody was asking about if these sessions were being recorded and whether they could be seen afterwards. And I said, yeah, and there's also sessions from New Zealand, from Australia, from Taiwan, from Shanghai, from Africa, and from the States. And it's amazing, you know, it's the international community of clinical research nursing. It's mind-blowing, it really, really is. And I think it's a testimony to Linda and to the other guys that really started this off, and Mary Larkin, and you know all those guys that, you know, that were really the trailblazers with the sort of development of the Nurse Managers Association, then sort of morphing into the IACRN. So I think it's amazing to think that transition and that journey that we've all been on. It's just amazing.
Thank you, Gordon. That is so true. It really is. It really is. It's great to like hear from people all over the place, hear the things that we have the same, hear the things that are different, some things that we can implement ourselves that might help. And also, of course, we here in Boston are very proud of the role that we played in the development of IACRN and the opportunities that it's afforded clinical research nurses everywhere. I should have mentioned that, you know, Mary Larkin was the president of IACRN. Catherine Griffith has served on the board of IACRN for several years, so we do even have a big presence in the international organization, of which we are extremely proud. So we thank you for joining us here in Boston. We hope you enjoyed our little tour. We're sorry that we couldn't show it to you in person. We're actually having a spectacular spring day here right now. I think it's 76 degrees according to my Minnie Mouse watch, and all the flowers are out, and we so wish that you could be with us. So maybe next year at this time, we'll be able to be together again. So thank you everyone for participating. We really appreciate your coming to join us.
Congratulations, and thank you very much to everyone at the Boston IACRN. It's been a fabulous event. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.